Start with Russian trains. I got on the Russian train. I needed the toilet. I opened the door, and yeah, I was bemused. I looked, and I swear I looked everywhere. And after 5 minutes, I was like, you know, like this. And then I saw this thing, and I went like this, and it opened, and my head was like here. And quickly, I closed the door and I left. And I was the rest of the journey, 19 hours. I just waited. I didn't want to go to the toilet again. Okay, that was the first experience. The second experience was banya. I was invited to go to Russian banya. It was a small village. It was a farm. And there was it was like a banya, a small building, another building. And the man, he took me and he said, "Seth, take off your clothes." All of your clothes. All of them? Yes. So I took off all my clothes and he said, "Right, we need to go and prepare supper. So this banya is for you." And he said, "It's very wet here. Moist, lots of steam." He said, "Your clothes will get wet. I will take away your clothes and put them in the next building." And he showed me that. So I said, "Хорошо," because that was the only word I knew in Russian. Okay, and I sat in the banya. It was wonderful. Oh, it was so nice. I love Russian banya. And I came out and I looked for my clothes. And I tell you honestly, I opened the door and it was about -10. There was snow everywhere. And I thought, this is real Russian extreme. I saw the path and I saw there are my clothes in the next dormik. And there's the dormik and there's the path, and it was dark. It was evening, it was dark. So I started on the trek with my clothes. And there was a Russian dog. Because it was a derevnia, it was a small farm, and it was a very scary Russian dog.
Scary.
And the dog was on a chain. And I was walking like this, and the dog came out. And the chain pulled the dog, and the dog was like this, and the chain was this long, and the path was here. And the dog was stopping my route on the path. And there was my clothes, and I saw there was another path. 2 paths. One through the dog, and the other path went around the house to the dormik with my clothes. So there was just one small problem. There was a big window, and there was lots of light coming from the window, and there was people sitting there around the kitchen table. When I say people, I don't just mean Russian mujiks, I mean ladies. I stood there in -10, and I faced a decision that no respectable British gentleman should ever need to face. Dog or ladies at the window. So, put up your hand if you think you know which did I choose. Nobody was kind of looking, hey? I went past the window very quickly and nobody saw me. So, that was my experience of Russian banya. Okay.
Just go there by yourself. You should take somebody.
I will next time. I will take British SAS with me. Russian kahor. It's a wonderful, wonderful Russian tradition. We don't really have it in England. It's fantastic. But it's difficult if you don't know Russian. So I knew about 150 Russian words. And we walked, what is it? Pashlopali. So, are you ready to? Okay. So anyway, we were walking with the rucksack, and they kept telling me, "Seth, Storozhna," like this, when there was danger. There was a hole, or there was some branches. I was like, there's danger everywhere here in Russia. And I was looking, what is this word? Storozhna. I only knew one word that was similar. Marozhena. And I thought, this is interesting. In Russia, if there is danger, you should say ice cream. No, it's strange, but ladno, okay, I will do that. So, Marozhena, danger. So the next morning, we went climbing. Russian extreme up the cliff. It was very dangerous with ropes and everything. And I got near the top, and my foot hit a rock, and the rock fell down the cliff. And I looked down, oh my God, there are people down there. What is that Russian word? Marozhena! And the people looked up and they're like, what? Stop! Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult when you don't know Russian. Bless their greedy souls. British Airlines, they told me, Seth, you have 2 rucksacks. You're right, I have 2 rucksacks. I have my bed in there, I have my tent, I have everything. They said, you can't have 2 rucksacks. You have to pay £60 for the second rucksack. British Airways, greed. And they said to me, £60? I have 60 rubles. Well, that'll do it. And they said, no. And so I began to get angry. And I said, you can't make me pay £60 for a second rucksack. This is my things. And the Russian girl there was like, angry British man. No. And she was a very nice Russian girl. And she said, listen, look over there. And I was like, what? And her supervisor was here, and she was trying to give me a podskaska. She was trying to give me a little hint. Look. So I looked, and then, ding! Genius! There was this mujik guy, and he had this funny thing with plastic that goes round and round. So I took my 2 rucksacks, and I put them down, and I said to him, wrap them. And he looked at me, this isn't a Christmas store. And I said, wrap them. And so he put them together. They were big rucksacks. They were full-size rucksacks. He put them together, and he wrapped them all over in plastic. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I didn't know any Russian, so I said, хорошо. That's the only word I knew. And I gave him 200 rubles or something. 200 rubles, not £60. 200 rubles. And I had a problem. How to carry it. It was about this big. So I rolled it. I rolled it through the airport, and Russians were looking at me, and they were lined up. It was like a show. I was this crazy Englishman rolling these big rucksacks. And the supervisor at the store, she looked with wide eyes. And the manager came, and they looked with wide eyes. 1 rucksack, pожалуйста. And, well, 3,000 rubles she saved me. Okay, because this is an American celebration, I'm going to take the dastardly liberty of making fun of Americans for a minute. So, are there any Americans here today? Please cover your ears for 5 minutes, okay? So, this is about George Bush. It's an old anecdote. When he was president, thankfully he's not president now. So, George Bush went to England to have tea with the British Queen. Put up your hand if you've heard this anecdote. George Bush, so he went and he sat having tea with the British Queen. And he said to the British Queen, Madam, everybody respects you. Everybody loves the British Queen. And nobody loves me. I'm not respected. What is your success? What is the secret? And the Queen said, yeah? Okay, great, thanks, mate. And the Queen said to him, well, you know, Mr. Bush, I'd like to surround myself with intelligent people. So George Bush said, how do you know they are intelligent? And the British Queen said, well, let me demonstrate to you, Mr. Bush. So she picked up the phone and she called the British Prime Minister. Does anyone know who was the British Prime Minister a few years ago? Tony Blair. David Cameron is a complete fool. Forget him. Tony Blair, who was intelligent, although a very bad man. So, Tony Blair, she said, Mr. Blair, yes, I would like you to answer a question. Okay? Very difficult question. Okay? I hope your audience will try to puzzle the answer to this. She said, Mr. Blair, your mother has a child, and your father has a child, and this child is not your brother or your sister. Who is it? One of these difficult questions, you know. But, okay, so Mr. Blair immediately answered, why, madam, it's me. And the Queen said, well done, Mr. Blair, thank you, and got the phone down. Politicians, not the most. Okay, so George Bush looked, wow, that's fantastic. That's a great example. I will remember that. So he flew back to America, to the US. I always call it America, and the Americans hate it because it's a continent. To the US. And he went to the White House, and he sat there, and he was bored. And he thought, what shall I do today? And he decided to call his senators. For Pravirka, a quick check. Yes? So he called Senator Helms, the Foreign Affairs Minister. He said, Mr. Helms, come here. Mr. Helms came, sir, how can I help you? And George Bush said, Mr. Helms, I want you to answer a question. What? He said, Mr. Helms, your mother has a child, and your father has a child. And this child is not your brother or your sister. Who is it? And Mr. Helms thought, and he had a thought. Sir, give me some time. I'll come back to you with the answer. So George Bush said, okay, go away. Okay, so Mr. Helms ran away, and he called all the senators together. They had a big meeting, and they talked for 2 hours. What is the answer? What is the answer? And eventually, in desperation, Mr. Helms took the phone, and who did he call? General. You know, it's like this особенности национальной русской охоты. You know, the general. He's the big, he knows everything, he's the powerful. So they called Colin Powell, the main general. And they said, Mr. Powell, we have a problem, sir. I can't do an American accent, sorry. He said, now looky here, son. Your mother has a child, and your father has a child. His child is not your brother or your sister. Who is it, boy? And Colin Powell immediately answered, why, it's me, of course. Mr. Helms was very happy. He was exhilarated. He ran back. Senators, we have the answer. Hallelujah. And he ran back to the White House. And he said, Mr. Bush, sir, he exclaimed, I know the answer. And Mr. Bush said, well, who is it? It's Colin Powell. It's not the end. And George Bush put his head in his hands and he wanted to weep. No, you complete cretin. Of course it's not Colin Powell. It's Tony Blair.